So much of what we hear around fertility advice is so geared towards the menstrual cycle, when to do this or how to support this phase. But what do you do if you don't have a cycle or if it's completely irregular and unpredictable? What does this mean for your fertility, and is it possible to ever get it back? On today's episode, we speak with a special guest who explains where to start and how to support your body if this is the case for you.
Welcome to your journey to fertility. This is the podcast that blends both science with spirit to give you all the tools you need as you navigate your fertility journey. I'm your host, Jennifer Edmonds, and for the last 15 years, I've been helping women on their journeys to motherhood and beyond. I believe that combining the latest scientific research along with the best energetic and mindset practices will help you to avoid putting your life on hold and bring you closer to your baby. Here each week, you'll learn ways to support your fertility and trust your body so you can stop stressing that you'll never have a baby and finally walk your path to motherhood. This is the Your Journey to Fertility podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me today. This episode is an important one. It's something that comes up pretty regularly with students that I work with, and that is where you're even supposed to start when you don't have a menstrual cycle. I think we're just assumed, as women that, we have our periods, that these things are normal for us. But for a lot of people, it isn't the case. And your period can go missing for a number of different reasons. Today, we're going to focus on that connection between the brain and the ovaries, where your brain starts to say, look, I don't think it's a good idea to ovulate, and I'm going to do other protective mechanisms to keep your body kind of functioning and safe in the meantime. So there's a lot to unpack, and our guest today is Lindsey Lusson, who is a registered dietitian, and she works with women to restore their menstrual cycles that have gone missing through hypothalamic amenorrhea, or HA, which is usually a condition where it's down to over-exercising and under-eating. Your body goes into survival mode and doesn't prioritize reproduction and therefore stops your period. But there are other forms of amenorrhea, and we cover quite a few of them. And if you know my story, you'll know that I struggled with amenorrhea after coming off the pill, and I didn't have my period for a very long time. And the things that Lindsey talks about in this conversation today really resonated with me because oftentimes, we're doing all the right things. We think we're being healthy. You're exercising, you're eating well, but are you exercising too much? Are you doing the right kind of exercise? Are you eating enough and the right kinds of foods to support your body? It might not be exactly what your personal situation needs. So if this is something that you're struggling with, I hope that this episode will give you some direction on what to do next. Here's Lindsey. Lindsey, welcome. I'm thrilled to have you here with me today. I have followed you for a long time. I love your content and you have an incredible story, which I would love to hear about. But to start off, can we start by learning a little bit about you? What is the work that you do and what is the journey that you went on to get to this point?
Yeah, you bet. And I think I can actually two birds, one stone and kind of weave my story into what I do because that's actually a big part of it. So I'm a registered dietitian. I've been a dietitian for, I think, coming up on 15 years, which I feel like makes me sound ancient. But I started in a variety of different areas as being a dietitian. And ultimately, after I got married, I was ready to start my family. And I realized that I couldn't because I wasn't getting my period. And this actually wasn't incredibly shocking to me. I actually lost my period when I was like 17 or 18, was placed on the pill and kind of told like, don't worry about it. But I feel like as a woman, you just have an intuition. You're kind of like, okay, that's not right. Like this is, so always in the back of my head, like I was like, it's going to be hard for me to get pregnant. It's going to be hard for me to get pregnant. And so ultimately, after being off the pill for like 9 months and still not getting my cycle, my decisions were to go ahead and start fertility treatment or to figure out why I wasn't getting a period. And so long story short, I had to change a lot of things about my lifestyle. I had to eat a lot more. I had to gain body fat. I had to kind of stop exercising almost completely. And I did get my cycle back and I was able to get pregnant. And I've since gone on to have 3 pregnancies. And it's just taught me a lot about my body and balance. And I started sharing my story on Instagram about 6 years ago, I guess at this point, 6 years ago. And I just started to realize that like, this is not an uncommon problem, especially as much as like the medical community at large talks about losing your period. I think so many times we're thinking like, oh my gosh, like the picture of an eating disorder, anorexia, And that's just not the case. That's what I haven't found to be the case with so many of the women that I've connected with. So now, today, 6 years later, I serve women in my private practice. I help active women with missing periods, get their periods back, get pregnant, and take home healthy babies.
That's amazing, isn't it? And it's so frustrating because we're always told that if we don't have a period, it doesn't matter unless we want to get pregnant. And I just find that ridiculous because it's like a monthly report card, isn't it? It tells you so much about your health. And if you're not menstruating, well, there's something missing there. There's something that our bodies are trying to tell us. Do you find that the women you work with have had missing periods for a long time and they've been told something similar? Or what have they been told by their doctors that they should do?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a large faction of the women that I work with who went on the pill for birth control, like in college or out of college, or, like, I don't want to get pregnant. I'm going to go on birth control. And then somewhere along the line, they went through a time of really obsessive eating or compulsive overexercise. They are probably still carrying some of those habits with them today, but they'll come off the pill in hopes of starting their families and literally be blindsided by the fact that, oh my gosh, I don't even get a period. So that's a large faction of the women that we work with. There's another faction of women that we work with who are actually placed on the pill. And this was my story too, actually placed on the pill because they're not getting a period. So they go to their doctor and say, hey, I'm not getting my period. And they'll say, simple solution, go on the birth control pill and then you will get your period and then everything's fine. And so that's something that I do think is getting better because we just actually have loads of research that shows a lot of the reasons why physicians are putting women on the pill who aren't getting a period is to protect their bones. And now we have loads of research that say that that doesn't work. And so more women are being told to potentially start on hormone replacement therapy. I still hear a lot of women being told to go on the pill though. And for those who are trying to get pregnant, they're then shuffled into fertility clinics.
Can you expand on that a bit more? This idea of being put on the pill to kickstart your period, and you and I are kind of chuckling about this because it is so ridiculous, but I was told this as well, even when I was trying to conceive. And it seems just the stupidest thing in the world. But what is this thing about protecting your bones? And can you explain that? And also how the pill doesn't actually kickstart your cycle?
Yeah, for sure. So the concern with bone loss and not having a period is that when your body is in a chronic low estrogen state, so if you aren't getting a period, you aren't bleeding. And part of the reason why you aren't bleeding is because you aren't building up a uterine lining because your estrogen levels are too low. And so with that comes kind of this whole slew of like menopausal symptoms and rapid loss of bone. So when your estrogen levels are that low and you're not cycling regularly, you can't put on bone mass like you should if you're 22, 25, 28, something like that. And you start losing bone mass almost like you would if you were postmenopausal. And so the thought, 2 decades ago was, okay, well, let's give these women some estrogen. We'll just give them the birth control pill because we don't want to be giving them too much estrogen. So let's just give them the birth control pill. So they're getting a little bit of estrogen and then they're getting that withdrawal bleed every single month. So they're shedding their lining. There's no risk for endometrial cancer, like done. But unfortunately, that doesn't actually solve the problem. We have seen several studies where women are on the pill progressively. I mean, and I've worked with athletes who have had repeat stress fractures. So, like, clearly, while on the pill and not cycling regularly. So, clearly, it's like not doing its job. And then the idea that the birth control pill should kickstart your period or bring your period back is just really, really false. And I hate this because I just feel like women as a whole have been really misled. We've just been kind of like told, like, here, just take this pill, like, no big deal. There's no side effects. It's not going to affect your fertility. It's bringing your period back. It's the exact same thing as your body cycling on its own. And that's just not true. So the mechanism of the pill is that it actually shuts down your body's natural hormonal flow. Because if we were to look at a graphical representation of estrogen, FSH, LH, and progesterone, which is kind of our four major player hormones in the female menstrual cycle, you would see that they are rising and falling at different parts throughout your natural cycle. When you go on the pill, you're kind of flatlined and then they drop and you get your period. Some people feel fine and some women feel insane because that's not really the natural flow of hormones that our body are supposed to have. And so your bleeding, your monthly bleed on the pill is not your body's natural flow of hormones.
Mm. And it makes so much sense when you explain it like that. I remember I went on the pill for birth control when I was in my early 20s. And I was told at the time, it's okay if you skip the sugar pills, you don't
Mhm.
need a bleed. All of these things, it doesn't matter if you come off the pill in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, it's not going to have any effect on your fertility. Sadly, that wasn't quite the case. But I think
Mhm.
we're kind of tricked into this. Tricked is probably not a fair word. I was led to believe that the pill tricks your body into thinking it's pregnant, which
Okay.
really the case. Have you heard this as well?
I haven't. This one's new for me, so
Oh
I'm
gosh.
entertained. Keep going.
It doesn't make any sense, but really it's tricking your body into menopause. Is that a more accurate description?
Yeah, I would say that that makes a little bit more sense, minus the fact that when you're truly menopausal, you actually are typically not bleeding. And I
Mm.
think too, if we like talk to women who have been through menopause or in menopause, there would be like, well, why would you want to be?
Yes.
It's not like the most like exciting time.
Got you. So, what are some of the reasons that we lose our periods, that our cycles go missing? And I know you work with women who have hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is often due to overexercise, undereating, but there are many causes. Is that right?
Yeah. So, I mean, what I would tell somebody is if they've been off the pill, or even actually if they stop getting their period while they're on the pill, that's a bit of a red flag. And unfortunately, a lot of times doctors will be like, that's normal. And true, depending upon the type of birth control that you're on, if you have like a hormonal IOD, it can be common to not cycle at all. That's kind of getting down a whole nother rabbit hole. But essentially, if you're not getting your period regularly, to your point, that is a monthly report card and something is up with your body. And so, what I always encourage people to do is to schedule an appointment with their doctor and to look at their thyroid, look at their prolactin levels, and then run like a basic hormone panel looking at estrogen, FSH, LH. We can throw progesterone in there because sometimes we'll see high progesterone levels with people. We'll be like, oh, you already ovulated. You're about to get your period. Like you're good to go. But getting those hormone values done can be pretty indicative of whether or not there's a true imbalance. Now, it gets really confusing because a common cause of period loss is also PCOS, which is different than HA. And unfortunately, they can present very similarly, missing periods, kind of wacky hormonal imbalance symptoms. So they can kind of mirror each other. But the root cause is very different. And there are a couple of lab tests where you should be able to distinguish between the two if somebody knows what they're doing. Unfortunately, how many times have you had blood work done, had the nurse call you 3 days later and say, your labs are fine, the end. And so I don't feel like a lot of times people are paying enough attention to really look at some of those distinguishing factors between the two.
Yeah. No, it's frustrating, isn't it? The whole everything's normal. You're fine. That was me. I guess we haven't had a period for a year. Clearly things are not normal. It's so incredibly frustrating. So if we're thinking about this monthly report card, what is the body actually trying to tell us? I mean, what is the disconnect? What's gone wrong if we're not getting a period?
Yeah, I mean, in the case of HA, we're learning that the body is stressed and that it has inadequate availability of energy to actually ovulate and make a baby. So it kind of makes sense. Our bodies are pretty smart. A lot of times people are like, oh my gosh, my body is broken. I'm not getting my period. The reality is your body's actually doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's trying to protect you and keep you alive.
Mm.
So if somebody were to be expending thousands and thousands of calories and then they start restricting their food pretty intensely, their body, in order to keep them alive, is going to shut down kind of our non-essential body functions like proper digestion, like reproduction, making proper thyroid hormones. Those systems kind of get put on the back burner so that our body has enough energy to literally keep us alive, for our heart to pump blood to our vital organs, for us to be able to breathe and be able to wake up and go to work. And so our bodies are actually protecting us when we lose our period. However, it's also a warning sign that, hey, my body is not working properly. And that's really how I think women should be thinking about it when they aren't getting a period. And I really, really, really hope, being optimistic, that healthcare practitioners start cluing in a little bit more that this is abnormal. We shouldn't just be quick to put women on hormone replacement therapy or birth control or shuffling them in fertility clinics.
And it is frustrating because, like you mentioned earlier, these people don't often present as those who might have an eating disorder. I mean, they're exercising and they look strong and they're still eating a healthy diet, but perhaps just not eating enough. And, I remember when I came off birth control, I didn't have a cycle for nearly 2 years. And like, this isn't normal. And I was teaching 40 Pilates classes a week. I was a personal trainer. I was going to spin classes after work. And it just seems so simple these days that wasn't working, just no shit. Like, who didn't pick that up? But no doctor said to me, look, what exercise are you doing? What are you eating? They're like, well, here's Clomid, here's Letrozole. Let's try and get you to ovulate. It was such a frustrating approach to solving what I was going through. So if we are in that position, we've had a missing period for however long, what are some of the tests that we can ask for? And should we be asking for them on a certain day? Is there anything that perhaps a doctor wouldn't necessarily test up straight away?
Yeah, I mean, for whatever reason, it seems that doctors don't love running labs, especially a full hormone panel. But, if we want to look at every possible reason for why somebody wouldn't be cycling, I would recommend doing that hormone panel, including, and you might even have to spell this out. I want these four hormones. I want estrogen, progesterone, FSH, and LH. I also recommend running a full thyroid panel. A lot of times doctors will just run a TSH, but we kind of want to look at T3 and T4. If T3 is low, that can be a sign that despite being a normal, being in a fit body, or maybe even being on the higher end of the BMI scale, that can be a sign of low energy availability. And that can be for a number of reasons, but that's an important thing to look at. Also, too, looking closer at thyroid antibodies, that's a way to pick up on some sort of subclinical hypothyroidism, potentially a Hashimoto's. Those are just not places that I see a lot of doctors looking, and I think can provide a lot of clues. Also, prolactin can indicate if there's some sort of pituitary adenoma that could be preventing somebody from ovulating. So those are really important lab tests to have done. A thorough reproductive endocrinologist, and I know you know this, Jen, they're probably going to want to do a pelvic ultrasound, make sure we don't have blocked tubes or any sort of kind of structural thing that might prevent us from cycling. So there's a lot of tests that you might have to request to get down to the bottom of your missing period. But if you're like a lot of the clients that I work with, you could do all of those things and be left with your labs are normal. We don't know why you're not getting a period. Here's the next steps, the pill, hormone replacement therapy, fertility treatment. And so what I really think we need to start doing and more in the clinical setting is having a couple of screening questions to ask patients about their lifestyle habits, about their stress levels, about their sleep, about their fueling, and about their exercise. And I will pause here for a second because there are a good number of women who struggle with HA that are going to be in denial that their habits are impacting their body's ability to cycle. So it takes two parts. It takes the clinicians being properly trained and thinking at things holistically and actually caring why somebody isn't cycling and asking those right questions. And it takes the patient to have some honest gut checks with themselves and to be forthcoming with information and not downplaying how much they're exercising or not, being defensive about some of their eating habits. And that's hard, because I think at the end of the day, if somebody is struggling with disordered eating, that is something that is kept close, and that is something that can feel very shameful to talk about. So there's a right way to do it, in my opinion. But I also understand that many clinicians simply don't have the bandwidth, the time, or the training to know to do those things.
Mm. When I work with students that have missing periods, and I have a large component that have PCS, but I do have another component that have had missing periods, and you do see what you were saying, this kind of not really willing to admit that perhaps their lifestyle is contributing to that and not wanting to change it because it makes them feel good. It's what they're used to. They love exercising. And when I started explaining how fertility yoga works, so much of it is about this sort of cyclical balance with the cycle. That's what makes it so beautiful. But when you don't have a period, people are like, well, how does this help me? So it's such a tricky balance of saying, look, well, we want to get you moving because it wakes up that hormonal system and that energetic system between the brain and the ovaries and gets your blood flowing and all these good things. But there's a way to do that without stressing your body. And you touched on it a little bit before, this idea that your body kind of goes into survival mode when it is not being given enough calories and it's expending a huge amount of energy. Can you explain a little bit more about the stress levels and the cortisol levels and what's actually kind of happening within the body when you are over exercising, and what are some of those gentler types of exercise that we can start looking at instead?
Yeah. So when the body is low on energy, we're going to see blood sugar levels drop. In order for the body to compensate in that blood sugar level drop, it will actually start pumping out some stress hormones, our adrenaline. So a lot of times women can be under fueling and over exercising and feel like they have loads of energy. They might be highly productive because they're kind of living in this chronic fight or flight state. When blood sugar levels remain low and the body continues to pump out adrenaline, it also then starts to pump out another stress hormone, cortisol. And so, again, women can kind of live in this running on cortisol mode for like years. It does people do typically have some sort of crash or burn, whether it's sky level anxiety or they experience a stress fracture or they have infertility or their like digestion just goes to shit. Most people will have like a rock bottom breaking point if they continue to operate in that. But when cortisol is chronically elevated, it can also interfere with the body system that where our brain is communicating to our ovaries saying, hey, this is a safe place. We can make a baby. If those cortisol levels are really high, really the message that your body is getting is this is not a safe place to make a baby. Shut it down. All systems do not go. We need to keep this person alive. Your body is just, operating in fight or flight. I kind of just like to think about it like you can't worry about making a baby because there's a bear behind you and it's chasing you. That's not what's happening, but that is the way that the body feels. And that's one of the reasons why chronic stress, especially chronic stress from over exercise, especially if someone's doing a lot of exercise and not appropriately fueling for it, that's why that ovulation can be shut down and somebody wouldn't have a cycle, wouldn't have a period.
It's such a good way to think about it because we just don't associate exercise with stress. We think it's like a stress reliever. And so, but your poor body doesn't understand that you're going for a run, 10 Ks every day, but are you not running from the bear? Like it's still very stressful for your poor body. Do you find that fertility treatments are actually effective for women who don't have a period?
It just depends. So depending on where someone's hormone levels are, they may have zero communication between their brain and their ovaries. And we'll usually see that with kind of our more textbook, more severe cases of HA, where somebody's estrogen levels are completely tanked out, and then their gonadotropins, their FSH and their LH, are also pretty low. And in those situations, you can't just give someone Clomid or Letrozole and expect them to respond, because the mechanism of those meds is actually to lower estrogen levels to then like the body would try to overcompensate to work. Well, that doesn't work if somebody's estrogen level is like 10. So usually women with HA are kind of already starting at higher levels of fertility intervention. So injectable meds, IUI, IVF. I'm sure you know even more about this than I do, but I think we have to think about it logically. And unfortunately, I don't see this often brought up in the clients, at least that I'm working with, is at the end of the day, if we're trying to force a pregnancy in a body that's overstressed and undernourished, it's probably not going to work,
Mm. And
even at higher levels of intervention.
we forget about that. Yes, we can override so many of these hormonal imbalances with treatments like IVF, but you're so right. Do we want to be forcing a pregnancy onto a body that is undernourished? And doesn't that have complications for the woman throughout pregnancy and for the baby?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, we start thinking about IUGR, intrauterine growth restriction, when somebody is already undernourished, because chances are if somebody's undernourished and trying to get pregnant, they're probably not going to nourish very well during their pregnancy. They're kind of going to carry the same thought processes and the same habits into their pregnancy, which potentially could impact the baby. I will say more often than not, baby ends up being fine, because when we're pregnant, our body actually prioritizes the best nutrition for the baby. Mom is more likely to end up malnourished postpartum than for her baby to suffer. So we sometimes see IUGR, but more often than not, what I'll see when a woman is continuing this same pattern during her pregnancy is that she won't gain enough weight during pregnancy. She will have her baby. Labor and delivery are an incredibly energy costed process. So too is lactogenesis. Even if you don't choose to breastfeed, the process of your body making milk, especially that first initial kind of week or two when the milk is coming in, your body is burning through so much energy. And so women who aren't gaining at least 25 pounds during their pregnancy will drop weight like this. And a lot of them will end up more underweight and more malnourished postpartum and kind of further back, like not even at square one, like behind square one.
Yeah, that is scary, isn't it? So, what are some of the treatments, or what are some of the things that we can do to start helping ourselves through this? And I find a lot of my students with HA, their doctor's advice is, well, you need to gain weight. And then they do. And it doesn't make any difference. So, what are we missing here?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's really important to understand, and I might have to say this twice because I think this is really hard to wrap our heads around. You can gain weight and still be undernourishing your body for fertility.
Mhm.
You can gain weight and still be undernourishing. So if somebody has underfueled and overexercised to the point of losing their period, chances are their metabolism has taken a pretty big hit. So, whatever amount of energy they're taking in, whatever amount of calories they're taking in, that's not a lot. That's allowing them to maintain their weight. Their metabolism has dropped down. Again, shutting down some of those body systems in order to prioritize our higher level functions. So somebody who is, eating, I hope it's okay if I just use a couple of numbers just to make it make sense. Somebody's eating 1,500 calories and their body has slowed everything down. It's literally holding on to every single calorie that it's getting just to function. And then let's say that person starts eating like 1,800 calories. They might actually put on weight pretty quickly because the body is thinking, oh my God, like, thank God, like, finally she's feeding me. But I know she's going to go back to 1,500 calories on Monday. So I'm going to hold on to everything. So usually people who are in this pattern can gain weight pretty easily without eating that much more. Now, you and I know that for an active woman, especially somebody who's coming from a place of chronic undereating, 1,800 calories is probably not going to cut it. So these women will gain weight. And because maybe they haven't really addressed any sort of underlying body image or disordered eating issues, that feels really scary. And so a lot of times I'll see people kind of get in this pattern of eat more, gain the weight, and then start restricting, start overexercising, start trying to control things back. And so they might on paper gain 15, 20 pounds that they probably needed to gain, but they're still engaging in the behaviors that are keeping their body too stressed to ovulate.
Yeah. And your body is so much smarter than we are, right? It knows, and it will do whatever it needs to do in order to ensure your survival. So if that's not enough, what is the answer then? I know this is going to be that's a massive question, right? And it's very individualized. And I think it is so essential to work with someone like yourself who specializes in this area. But then what is the key? What are we missing?
So the key is finding out how to make your body feel safe and happy. And that is going to require eating more, probably a lot more than you think,
Mm.
and addressing lots of underlying stressors. So, of course, exercise matters, but as you've already touched upon, we don't necessarily want to say, like, don't exercise at all or like sit on the couch. We want to make sure we're moving our bodies in ways that aren't over stressing, but are promoting good blood flow, helping us to have a healthy outlet for stress, while also finding new tools to put in our tool belt so that exercise isn't our only outlet for stress management.
Mm.
And so focusing on re-nourishing your body, focusing on lowering stress levels and moving the body in ways that support fertility rather than hinder it are really kind of the main things that I like to focus on clients. A lot of times people will have to gain weight to be able to have a regular period and be able to get pregnant. But I've found that it's not helpful to make that the focus because at the end of the day, we really don't know where your body needs to be to feel safe. And if we can take the pressure off of focusing on that, a lot of times people can just, okay, like it's not about the weight. I can focus on these other things. These are things that I know that I can do. These are things that I know. Like we can't argue with the fact that, okay, even if you feel like you're healthy, your body's telling you a different story because it's not getting a period. And so it feels good to know I need to nourish better for fertility. I need to slow down and manage my stress. And I probably need to slow down a little bit on the exercise. Like I think most people can reconcile with that a lot easier rather than hyper focusing on the idea, oh my gosh, I need to gain up to this, or I need to be this BMI, or how much weight do I have to gain? I've found that taking the focus off weight actually helps people to become more at peace with the process and kind of fall back into alignment faster.
Which is so important as well. And is it important what you eat? It's not just how much we're eating, but is there a real focus that you find helps on the types of foods that you eat?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest thing is figuring out where the imbalance is and correcting that. A lot of the clients that I work with are under consuming carbohydrates. I won't say that that's the case for every single person, but if somebody lost their period by going low carb or doing clean eating and literally cutting almost all processed carbs out of their diet, that's probably a gap that we need to start filling in together. Same too with fats, same too with overall energy, same too with time restricted eating. And so I always like to find out what type of kind of diet or clean eating plan or fitness kick, like I kind of like going back in time and figuring out like, okay, well, how did we get here, because those are probably the things that we really need to address for that specific person.
Yeah, of course. When do we know that it is time to seek support? I think that, we go through the motions and we think maybe we just need to give it time. And I was told by so many doctors I just needed to give it time. And I really wish I had found a holistic practitioner sooner, because
Mhm.
I think if I had done that from the start, then perhaps IVF wouldn't have been my solution in the end. So, when do we know that perhaps what we're doing isn't working and we should seek out someone like yourself to work with instead?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of depends upon your goals and your timeline. Now, I will say there's probably going to be some people listening to this who are more in the denial phase, and they might need more time to just kind of sit with the information and do that honest, thorough self assessment of, hey, is this me? Is this not me? And, starting with lab work, it's kind of hard to argue with like, tanked out hormone levels, like clearly something's up, right? So, I mean, I would say that I think that everybody has different healing timelines. I would say that if fertility is on the forefront and you don't want to waste time in your fertility journey, let's say you're listening to this and you're 34 and you want 3 kids, like don't wait, like make an appointment today. Find a practitioner who's going to really assess your situation, who's going to have an hour-long conversation with you about your situation, who isn't afraid to order more labs. I would say it depends a little bit upon your situation and what your goals are. But yeah, if you're somebody who has, been through the ringer on fertility stuff, or like, you're ready to start your family sooner than later, then I would get on it sooner than later.
Agree. Lindsay, thank you so much for coming and sharing all of this knowledge today. Where can people learn more about you and connect with you and perhaps ask you these questions and get started on their own journey?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm pretty active on Instagram at food.freedom.fertility. I usually do like a monthly Q&A on Instagram. I also have a podcast, the Period Recovery and Fertility Podcast. I'll go in depth and do kind of deep dive listener questions quarterly on that podcast as well. But I'd also just say like my DMs are always open. I share a lot of information about underfueling, overexercising, and infertility, because there are women too who don't totally lose their period, but their fertility can still be affected by kind of those same patterns that I've talked about today. So I share a lot of tips and information on Instagram. I have a lot of like freebies and masterclasses that you can get plugged in just by following some of my Instagram channels and reels. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Thank you. And I will link to those in the show notes as well. And I love your content. For anyone who's listening who doesn't follow Lindsay, please go and do so, because
informative but gentle, and you have such a kind approach with the way that you present your information. And that's just what women need when we're in this space. We don't need to be told what we're doing wrong or, where we've messed things up in the past. So I think you just have a really genuinely lovely approach at that. So thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I look forward to connecting with you again, Lindsey. Thank you so much for your time. I love how quick talking and straight to the point Lindsey is with all of her information. She is so good to listen to. She has a podcast of her own. So if you want to connect with her and learn more about her, I will link her website, her Instagram, and her podcast below. Now, if this is something that you enjoyed, please remember to share it with someone. It's always wonderful to know that these resources are available, and you never know who might benefit from knowing that they are around. And if you have 30 seconds, I would love it if you could leave me a quick written review. Just scroll down to the bottom of the episode and click a star rating and leave a review. That is such a wonderful thing that you can do to support the podcast and to help more people learn about it. So on the next episode, we are going to be talking about exercise and the menstrual cycle and how you can use exercise to support your fertility. So it follows on a little bit from what we learned today. This is one we're going to go into talking about not just things like yoga and Pilates, but all forms of exercise, and are they appropriate? Are you going through fertility treatments? Can we exercise during IVF? There is so much misinformation around about this, and it's something I find that doctors don't always have a lot of answers to. So I can't wait to have you back here for that episode. Until then, I am sending you all my wishes as you continue your own journey to fertility. The most common thing I hear from students who are on their fertility journey is that the stress of trying to conceive has taken over their life. Your days end up being filled with endless appointments, navigating pregnancy announcements. You're trying to eat right, take all your supplements, and it is all you think about from the moment you wake up. I designed the Element Fertility Yoga course to support your body, your mind, and your mental health in 3 important ways: to synchronize your hormones, increase circulation and blood flow, and to help regulate your nervous system. But on top of this, the greatest gift that you can give yourself throughout this journey is a sense of peace, to help you calm your mind and just make this process feel easier. Every single one of my students tell me that this is the first thing they notice after starting a yoga, meditation, and breathwork practice. But on top of this, you have the amazing benefit of actually supporting and increasing your fertility. Studies have shown that those participating in mind-body programs as they're trying to conceive have success rates 3 times greater than those who don't. The course I've designed walks you through natural conception as well as fertility treatments and IVF cycles. And the best part is you can work through it at your own pace in the comfort of your home. The practices start from just 10 minutes per day. To learn more, visit elementpilatesyoga.com or see the link in the show notes.